They make the old feel young again, and the young feel glorious. Even the simplest sparklers demand attention. Aerial spectaculars hold us spellbound with their power and beauty. To the Japanese, they are hanabe, flowers of fire.
There's something magical. It goes back to our basic roots as human beings and the mystery of fire. To see the sky explode from darkness into this bright light and feel these concussions. It gets somewhere right in the center of our brain and says, now this is something special.
An ancient epigram says that he who has smelled the smoke can never again escape it. And for many enthusiasts, their fascination begins in childhood.
The fun of fireworks when you were a kid was the first time you were an alchemist. You could touch something to a fuse and a rocket would go up into the air. The sense of power almost. You could send a thing soaring into the heaven or scare the cat or scare your parents in particular.
Whatever their age, fireworks craftsmen delight in thrilling crowds. They are constantly striving to create bigger shows, more dazzling effects, and appreciative audiences. Early each spring, 2 weeks of festivities precede the most famous horse race in America, the Kentucky Derby. 500,000 fans flock to Louisville, Kentucky to indulge their love of horses and to experience one of the largest fireworks shows in the world, Thunder over Louisville. 24 hours before showtime, hardy early arrivals stake out the best vantage points on the banks of the Ohio River. 30 floors above the ground, in Command Central, show producer Wayne Hettinger oversees the final countdown to Thunder.
We're always tasked with kicking off a bigger event for the Kentucky Derby Festival. That's my job, to make sure that it's got a bigger and better look to it. There's no doubt in my mind we're going to lay it on the line good this year.
Thunder over Louisville is the creation of the famed Zambelli family of Newcastle, Pennsylvania. For the past century, 3 generations of Zambellis have brightened skies and lifted spirits at events around the world. Presidential inaugurations, royal salutes, the American bicentennial. These and scores of other memorable occasions have felt the Zambelli's special touch. For the National Victory Celebration after Operation Desert Storm, they welcomed the troops home with a specially designed yellow ribbon pattern in the skies over Washington. These and other patterns are produced by laying chemical pellets in a shell along a cardboard cutout of the desired shape. Filler material surrounds the chemical pellets, also known as stars. Once airborne, a fuse ignites the stars and they burst out to form the pattern. George Zambelli Sr. has directed the company since 1957 and now proudly goes by the nickname of Mr. Fireworks. For the Thunder extravaganza, he oversees scores of highly skilled pyrotechnicians.
My father would often say, it takes longer to be a good pyrotechnician than to be an MD, so we all know how long that takes. It just takes time because it's not in a book. You've got to learn the process, you've got to learn the mixtures, the formulas, you've got to try them out, you've got to experiment with them. It's a long process.
George Zambelli Jr. is an MD, an ophthalmologist, who remains heavily involved in the family business.
There are 24 pyrotechnicians working on the bridge today. They're not only putting in the final mortars, but they're also checking all the connections, putting in the field modules, which will connect to the main module and then to the laptop computer.
This year's show contains an astonishing 40,000 shells, weighing over 50 tons. Every single shell is handmade, and each one must be carefully mounted in its own mortar. They are designed with a specific pattern and use chemicals that burn with the prescribed color.
But we really wouldn't want to lean over one of the tubes in case static electricity would fire one of the rockets. But standing here, if one of the rockets fired, we'd be relatively safe.
Back in the command center, the production team keeps careful watch over the mainframe computer designed to run the show. It bounces instructions off a satellite and down to the electrical controls tied to each batch of charges.
We will be sending signals out to the fireworks on the barges as well as on the bridge. We're all tied in to the central time clock coming off the satellites. They can run independently, but the backup system is all coming through here to keep them all interlinked.
Throughout the afternoon and evening, the crowd gathers and anticipation grows. The main event is preceded by an elaborate air show featuring everything from war reenactments to UFOs. As the clock ticks down, director Tim Creed is the one man with his finger on the abort button. Any sign of malfunction or safety breach can put the show on hold and disappoint an eager audience that includes millions of television viewers.
Nobody wants a delay. The time when everybody gets a chance to calm down is when the fireworks go. When the fireworks start, it's all on computer. And we really get to sit back and enjoy it. It's a lot of fun. At 9:30, it's a different situation than 9:25.
Precisely at 9:30 p.m., the sky over Louisville ignites. One of the early effects is the dazzling Zambelli rainbow. Every color that fireworks technology is currently capable of creating appears above the 2nd Street Bridge. Special iridescent violet, cyan, and tangerine shades developed in Spain complete the 1.5-mile rainbow. Sticks of aluminum powder running the length of the bridge provide a cascading waterfall, longer than any natural one on Earth. By 9:52, the sky has gone dark, and a satiated crowd believes the show is over. But the calm is a false finale. Pause before the grandest finale the world will see this year. In the next 2 minutes, 6,000 shells will explode over Louisville. The show that thrilled Louisville was state-of-the-art, but the technology behind it had come directly from the ancient invention of gunpowder. The origins of fireworks date back at least 1,000 years and are traced to the Far East. Most historians agree that the Chinese invented black powder, the original gunpowder and the source of pyrotechnic explosions. Legend has it that a Chinese chemist accidentally combined saltpeter or potassium nitrate with 2 fire starters, sulfur and charcoal, and thus stumbled onto a combustible mixture.
The Chinese made firecrackers out of this by confining it in tubes. They made rockets that shot up in the air and produced pyrotechnic effects and really created the beginnings of today's fireworks industry.
Early fireworks burned in pale shades of white and gold, the natural tints of sulfur, charcoal, and potassium nitrate. When the powder was packed into closed bamboo tubes, the firecracker was born. A tube with one open end created the first skyrockets. The the Chinese imbued the mysterious and powerful new force with religious meaning, using its sound to ward off evil spirits. In time, most significant events, births, weddings, funerals, were marked by the ritual display of fireworks. When Western explorers saw firecrackers and skyrockets, they immediately recognized the military potential. They brought gunpowder back to Europe, where the English monk Roger Bacon cracked the mystery of its composition. Bacon feared the invention and recorded his formula in a secret code. But the Pandora's box was open, and by the 1400s, gunpowder factories had sprouted up from England to Italy. European nations quickly learned that the new technology could shift the balance of power.
The real important person in 15th, 16th century military technology was the powder maker, because someone who could produce and knew all the secrets to make a good black powder, a good gunpowder, determined how far your cannons could fire. And of course, in naval warfare, as soon as your ship gets within firing range of the enemy ship, you open fire. And if you have an excellent black powder, it would give you an enhanced firing range and military superiority.
Gunpowder and fireworks continued to spread. Marco Polo imported the formula to Italy, making his homeland the fireworks capital of the world for centuries to come. The Italians crafted fireworks fountains, an effect created when iron filings were added to the mix and sprayed out in a stream of fire. Royalty across Europe took full advantage of their new toy. In Russia, Peter the Great loved noise and delighted in personally setting off charges. When his son Alexis was born in 1690, Peter assaulted the ears of Moscow residents with a deafening 5-hour salute. Military victories were invariably celebrated by showers of fire. In 1749, the end of the Austrian War of Succession was marked by a memorable display of nationalistic pride.
There were celebrations all over Europe, and in Paris they had one where the Italians and the French pyrotechnicians got into a big argument about who was going to set off the show. The fight broke out, the fireworks went off by mistake. 300 people were wounded, some 40 or 50 were killed. All this for the honor of setting off the fireworks. French and Italians, great tempers, and everything went up, boom.
Extravagant structures known as temples or machines provided a majestic backdrop for displays. These facades could reach hundreds of feet into the sky and acted as grand, albeit temporary, launching pads.
A fireworks show would often involve building an elaborate set, a frame, and then they would put fountains, they would put wheels that would rise into the air. They would fill this framework with a number of different types of fireworks devices. It was frequently the case that the set would catch fire and the grand finale would be the burning of the entire frame as the end of the evening show.
Early in the 1800s, fireworks displays began to employ innovative set pieces. A wooden framework was built in the shape of a face or more complex scene. Approximately every 4 inches a charge was attached to the frame, and a fuse ran the length of the contraption. When lit, a fiery image appeared, as in this portrait of President Herbert Hoover. The largest set piece ever built was in England, at the Crystal Palace display in 1898. A structure hundreds of feet long depicted a massive collage of quaint houses and striking buildings. From its Chinese origins up until 1800, fireworks presentation had advanced, while the underlying science remained largely unchanged. But with the industrial age came modern chemistry and vividly colored minerals. Strontium compounds burned red, while copper gave off a blue-green flame. Americans flocked to the exciting new colors, producing a boom in consumer fireworks. Mass-market ads directed primarily at children became a staple of American magazines and catalogs. Colorful, cartoon-like images enticed the young to join in on the fun. This age of innocence ended abruptly when the United States joined the First World War.
The skies went dark on the 4th of July during the First and Second World Wars, and the fireworks companies and manufacturers in the U.S. were converted into ordnance producers. They were a valuable resource for the country to have in that they provided an experienced group of powder mixers and blenders and people who were used to handling explosives. They greatly aided our war effort.
Fireworks had traveled the length and breadth of the globe, migrating from China to Europe to the United States. The business had transformed itself to help safeguard the freedoms of the New World. In the years to come, a determination to celebrate that same freedom would bring fireworks to new heights of brilliance. In the United States, the custom of marking Independence Day with fireworks began in 1777, 6 years before the Revolutionary War ended. John Adams had asked his compatriots to solemnize their freedom with bonfires and illuminations from one end of this continent to the other, and they responded eagerly. By the late 19th century, fireworks had become affordable for the common man, and private citizens from New York to California staged jarring celebrations.
A backyard fireworks show in this country, say at 1900, would have been filled with large explosive devices. There were no regulations. You could go out and buy large quarter sticks of dynamite to make a loud bang, let everybody in the town know that you were celebrating the 4th of July.
From a young boy's point of view, the 4th of July was fireworks paradise. The availability of fireworks was widespread. He could walk into the local dime store, buy whatever his meager pocketbook would afford, and have the time of his life.
By early in the 20th century, the 4th of July had become a major national event, more important than before or since. While most children delighted in their power to make noise, each year a few unlucky revelers were maimed or killed in explosions. Blank cartridge pistols were popular, despite their tendency to shatter and embed pieces of metal in young hands.
What often happened was that a child would have an accident like this, which by today's standards we would consider relatively mild in most cases, but back during those days, the ensuing tetanus infection took a lot of lives.
Over the years, approximately 4,000 Americans died celebrating their independence, more than the number of American soldiers who perished in battle during the Revolutionary War. The same social forces pressing for prohibition of alcohol embarked on an anti-fireworks crusade. Calls rose for a safer and saner 4th. Between 1910 and 1914, several states passed laws restricting the sales and distribution of certain types of fireworks. While new laws regulated the most dangerous consumer explosives, fireworks continued to be marketed to children well into the 1940s. Elaborate catalogs enticed them with low-tech action figures who often ended their brief existence in a glorious burst of self-destruction.
There was SOS fire engine, and it would let off a terrible siren and blow up, which is very unlikely for a fire engine to do. There was even an SOS outhouse. You'd see the smoke coming out of the half moon, then a shriek, and then bang, it would blow up. It was a marvelous series of things you could find in those catalogs.
As consumer fireworks became more limited, towns and cities developed the custom of grand communal celebrations. One of the great rituals of small-town America was young and old gathering in the town square for the annual Independence Day Bash.
It was an occasion, and you learned for the first time that there was pleasure in a community gathering because you were all there to see something. Except it was better than the theater, it was better than the opera, it was better than the concert because it was surprising. You never knew what was going to happen quite, what you were going to see in the sky.
For young children, the fireworks man was a figure of great mystery and respect. He held the power to unite and thrill the entire town. And, like life itself, the pace of fireworks shows was slower in those days.
A fireworks show 50 years ago would typically last an hour. Each shell would be fired up in the air, it would burst, the crowd would ooh and ah. 10 seconds later, another shell would go up. In 1925, 1930, that was big entertainment.
Many of those Depression-era shows were created by relatively recent immigrant families. Ever since Marco Polo brought the formula for gunpowder from China to Italy, the Italians have been renowned fireworks craftsmen. Searching for a better life, they came to America and brought with them their secret recipes.
For centuries, the most closely guarded secrets in the fireworks industry were the formulas, the recipes to make the perfect gold color, the perfect green color, the perfect gold spark effect. Books with recipes and formulas were handed down from grandfather to son, were guarded very, very closely. You would reveal the family finances before you'd reveal the family formulas.
In 1870, pyrotechnician Angelo Lanzetta moved his family from Italy to Long Island, New York. By the 1920s, his great-nephew, Felix Grucci, was head of the family. During the Depression, Felix and his brother made a brief foray to Miami in search of business.
My dad and my uncle thought that the grass would be greener during the Depression time down in Miami. Their first client happened to be a call from Al Capone. At first, my father was, gee, I don't know if we should do this. This is Al Capone, and he was afraid, but they were desperate for money, let's say, and it was their first customer. So he and my uncle decided to do the program.
Local authorities denied Capone a permit for his show, forcing its cancellation and letting the Gruccis off the hook. The very next day, they awoke to screaming headlines announcing the St. Valentine's Day Massacre in Chicago. Capone, it seemed, had planned the fireworks party in Miami to provide himself with an alibi.
The two of them looked at each other and said, oh my gosh, this is not something we want to be involved in. They kind of packed their bags up, left Miami, came back to New York, came out to Long Island, and that's where they've been ever since.
For Felix Grucci and his family, fireworks was a calling. They worked from dawn until after dark, perfecting their craft and building an enduring business.
When we were small and young kids, we never went on vacations. Our vacations would be going to a firework program, wherever it may be, with my mother and father. And it was their way of life.
The Gruccis, of course, are from the patriarch, old Felix, down to the very youngest, have always had this great passion about fireworks. The one I particularly remember was Jimmy, who had a system set up in his house so that when the alarm clock would go off in the morning, on would come the Tchaikovsky's 1812 overture in the middle of it when there's a huge firework burst, so the whole house would reverberate in fireworks and Tchaikovsky.
By the 1970s, the Gruccis had established themselves as one of the premier fireworks companies in the United States. Felix, the patriarch, had accomplished much, but his children urged him to raise his sights even higher. They wanted the family to enter the world's most prestigious fireworks competition in Monte Carlo.
It took a long time between my mother and myself, but we got them convinced, okay, we're gonna do this, but Dad, we're gonna go over there and we're gonna win. I guarantee you we're gonna win. And what if we don't win? We're gonna be disgraced. You know, it was a very big thing with Italian fathers in small businesses anyway, the word disgrace.
In 1979, the Grucci's trekked to Monte Carlo to take on the world. From the beginning, their effort was dogged by logistical nightmares. They brought thousands of shells, none of which fit the local metric-sized mortars. Quickly adapting, they bought every container of Vaseline they could find and used it to lubricate the mortars.
Master fireworks maker Jimmy Grucci from Belport, Long Island, United States of America.
The entire show had been synchronized to an intricate electrical system. When some of the fuses failed, the shells had to be fired manually, destroying the precise timing that had been planned for months.
Okay, Dick, go start shooting.
All the problems were forgotten when the Grucci's unleashed their grand finale. Two minutes of thunderous noise shook Monte Carlo. Gamblers ran out from the casinos to see if they were under attack. The next day, the competition judge announced the winner.
Call that Spain has received the second prize and that Mr. Grucci of the United States has been awarded the first prize.
I had never seen my dad cry. He actually started to cry. It still makes me very emotional to see. I mean, he was in his 70s when this had happened, and it was such a proud moment for him, and I saw my brother embrace him, and it was just great. We will never forget that as long as we live, none of us. It was a very exciting, proud moment for us.
The victory at Monte Carlo pushed both the Grucci's and American fireworks to the forefront. A century after coming to America, the Grucci's had surpassed their old friends back in Italy. Just a few years later, they would team with other immigrant families to create a memorable tribute to their ancestors and to the land that had welcomed them. In the years following their triumph at the Monte Carlo Festival, the Grucci family continued to fine-tune their technique. Each working day at their factory on Long Island ended with a lively test of the latest shells.
Our neighbors used to enjoy the fireworks. They used to come out every night. They knew when it was 5 o'clock because the 5 o'clock would be the blast. They used to watch it. It was like a fireworks show to them.
One of the Grucci's most memorable accomplishments was the centennial commemoration of the Brooklyn Bridge in 1983. A century earlier, the bridge had opened to a glorious fireworks display captured by vivid paintings. The Grucci's were determined to surpass the original. Traffic on the bridge was slowed and later stopped as the Grucci team planted its charges. Then, just 3 hours before showtime, a fireboat cruised underneath the bridge and fired its water hoses into the air.
We were like, oh my God, this boat's gonna wet everything. If it gets wet, it's not gonna go off. My mother, she goes on every program. She wears her rosary beads around her neck. Boy, she started praying real quick at that point. She must have went through those beads like there was no tomorrow on it.
Fortunately, only a few charges were ruined, and the show went off in spectacular fashion. New Yorkers roared their approval. For many, the highlight was a Grucci invention. The bridge and river below meeting in a cascade of fire they dubbed Niagara Falls. The Gruccis were but one of the families from Italy that rose to prominence in American fireworks. The Zambellis, masterminds behind Thunder over Louisville, began their American journey in 1893. Antonio Zambelli settled in Newcastle, Pennsylvania because its climate was similar to the region near Naples from which he hailed. When Antonio passed through Ellis Island en route to his new home, he carried his most precious possession, a little black book with the family fireworks recipes.
They're still written in Italian, and we have them in a safe that's locked up, and really I'm going to have to teach one of my children how to get to them. And whenever I need any help, I have an Italian friend that reads them for me, and we translate them, and we're using those same formulas today.
From the early years all the way into the 1960s, much of the Zambellis' business came from Italian saints' days.
People would march behind the band down to the fireworks site. And that's how they got the people down to the site, because it wasn't always right next to where the festival was being held. It was, down a few blocks, and the band would, play the Italian march all the way down to the field, and then the fireworks would go off.
Each generation of pyrotechnicians has passed down its knowledge to its children and grandchildren. Until very recently, there were no formal studies of the chemistry involved in fireworks. You learn by doing, starting as early as possible.
When I was 12, I actually got to get out and fire the shows for the first time and torch off a big 12-inch shell. So I got to get involved at a very young age, where now today, with all of the licensing procedures, particularly here in California, you're not even allowed to be on site until you're 18 years old.
Jim Souza of Pyro Spectaculars runs yet another immigrant family dynasty, the Souzas of California. Of Portuguese heritage, the Souzas have been displaying their unique brand of showmanship for nearly a century. In recent decades, they have pioneered safer forms of fireworks.
In 1969, my father and one of his co-workers were seriously injured in a display that they were firing off in San Francisco. And it occurred because of a 6-inch shell detonated in the mortar and got my father. He lost the use of his hands. And from that moment, after that accident, the whole family said we were going to do whatever we could to pioneer the firing of fireworks electronically.
Since the beginning of fireworks, blasts had been triggered by manually igniting each shell. Electronic firing held the promise of putting distance and a measure of safety between technician and explosion. And by permitting central control of the shells, electronic ignition also opened up an entirely new creative vista. For the first time, hundreds and thousands of blasts could be planned and synchronized to the second. By the 1980s, electronic firing had become the standard for major programs. The new technology would be put to its most extensive use at one of the largest displays ever attempted, the 1986 centennial of the Statue of Liberty. For this once-in-a-lifetime event, 3 proud and competitive families joined forces.
It was too much for one fireworks company to do, so the 3 big fireworks companies in this country, the Zambellis, the Souzas, and the Gruccis, came together to work on one project. People said this will never work, this can't be done. But they came together, they cooperated, they joined forces and put on one of the most spectacular fireworks shows that this country has ever seen, and probably will see for a number of years to come.
No single event in history has done more to expand the popularity of fireworks than the United States bicentennial in 1976. Dazzled by shows in New York Harbor and around the country, consumers began to see fireworks as its own form of entertainment. Rock concerts and sporting events soon incorporated the craze. amateur pyrotechnicians staged a resurgence. Pyrotechnics Guild International, or PGI, was formed by serious hobbyists as a forum to share their eccentric passion. Their annual convention concludes with the lighting of a superstring, a lengthy series of explosives worthy of any professional company.
They're great fun. They're hugely enthusiastic people. I went to one where there was a moment of silence when one of their members had died, and his ashes were sent up in this absolutely spectacular chrysanthemum shell. And somebody said, "This is in memory of Bill Thomasville." We all watched this lovely show. May have made it himself, for all I know, and this great burst. We all remembered him and remember the shells he made, and so very beautiful stuff.
The increased worldwide demand has triggered a jump in fireworks quality. Colors are more vivid now than 20 years ago. Electronic firing has brought precision to performances, and modern science is finally catching up with an ancient art.
Fireworks chemistry is a very complex area of chemistry. You're dealing with very, very fast chemical reactions, explosions. You're dealing with the disappearance of your reaction products. There's nothing left to analyze when the burst is over. So fireworks technology for centuries was much more an art than it was a science.
Chemistry has allowed pyrotechnicians to understand how their materials work. Computers have given them unprecedented creative freedom. A show designer can now chart out a program burst by burst, changing the sequence with the touch of a button. In recent years, so-called specialty fireworks have expanded their repertoire. At Universal Studios Hollywood, this pyrotechnic show heralds the opening of the T2 3D attraction. Theatrical fireworks experts produce a wall of fire that nearly touches performers, yet remains safe. Close proximity fireworks contain powders that fire at a lower than normal temperature and consist of extremely small pellets that ensure a quick and safe burn. And in a break with tradition, their contents are mixed by machine.
This is a look to the future. In most firework applications, the manufacturing is done by hand. We've developed this state-of-the-art technology, this piece of machinery that allows us to build very special and very precise mini-gerbs. By the use of the computer and electronic scales, we can control the exact measurement of the powders so that we can control the burn time and the altitude for our mini-gerbs to be fired very safely on stage.
When the Souzas were called on to provide entertainment for the California Angels baseball team, they faced an unusual challenge. The charges had to be placed inside a water-filled rock formation. They devised submarine fireworks that can remain dry for hours beneath flowing water, ready to burst forth when the home team hits a home run. State-of-the-art facilities like the Souza factory separate chemical mixing and handling into many different buildings, thus limiting the threat from any potential explosion. But sparks and static electricity can still trigger tragedy. And as recently as 1985, 21 workers died in an Oklahoma explosion. Around the world, fireworks are being used in increasingly varied ways. Virtually every country has a day of national celebration when they let loose and fill the sky with fire. Frenchman Pierre Hubert is a former architect whose trademark is fireworks in motion. For a show in Beijing, he fired explosives from the backs of hundreds of bicyclists.
Bicycle everywhere. Everybody has this bicycle. It's millions in Shanghai. It's millions of bicycles. So it came to my mind immediately. I have to do something with the bicycle.
Hubert was also commissioned to create a show for the 1982 meeting of the Western heads of state at Versailles.
The heads of states are moving. They are always in car. They leave the castle and they go in the park by car. 10 cars. The president are looking like that. So it was a kind of fireworks promenade. Always fireworks in motion. But in this case, it was the public was in motion.
In Japan, Hubert invited an entire town to join in building a mobile whale and then used the beast as a seaborne backdrop to fireworks.
Japan has a tremendous tradition of fireworks, and they shoot them off on every possible occasion. Spring planting, fireworks everywhere. And even when you land at an airport in Japan, you will see usually fireworks somewhere in the distance, something being celebrated.
Those who rarely have the opportunity to experience fireworks welcome them all the more. In 1982, the Souzas produced the first major show in Hong Kong in years.
I'm sitting in the control room, not knowing really what to expect. The pressure was building. And then finally we launched the first 12-inch shell. It goes up with a rising tail. And at that very moment, we saw millions of people with their cameras and flashes going off and creating this effect I've never seen before in the Hong Kong harbor. And at that moment, we knew we were successful.
Those who have devoted their lives to fireworks consider themselves blessed. Theirs is a craft that inspires wonder and brings joy to all who behold it.
They love fireworks. They love to please people. They're entrepreneurs in the sense that they're involved in this lovely science of beautification, if we were beautifying the skies, filling the skies with beauty and color. It's a grand, grand science, pyrotechnics.